chosen one. You silenced the critics, took your power back, and shocked them with intelligence they never saw coming. This is the reckoning. What you're stepping into isn't survival, it's domination. Let them talk, let them guess. You already moved. The most dangerous mind in any room. You remember those moments when you stayed quiet while others ran their mouths, when you observed instead of reacted, when you felt everything but showed nothing. They labeled your restraint as fragility. They called your silence confusion. They dismissed your emotional awareness as being too soft to play in the arena. What nobody knew, what nobody could possibly comprehend, is that you weren't slow. You were gathering data. Every conversation became intelligence. Every interaction became reconnaissance. While others performed for an audience, you were cataloging patterns, decoding intentions, mapping psychological profiles, like a strategist preparing for war. You weren't reacting because you were building a case. You were watching people reveal themselves piece by piece, collecting evidence nobody even knew they were giving you. And here's the part that's about to blow your mind. Your silence wasn't surrender. It was surveillance. Your quietness wasn't weakness. It was warfare preparation. You were studying the battlefield while others thought you were cowering in the corner. But something deeper is happening here that we need to expose. This pattern of underestimation didn't just happen once. It became the operating system everyone ran on. And that's exactly what gave you the advantage you're about to exploit in ways nobody will ever recover from. Others tried to lock you into an old version of yourself, the one who was still healing, still figuring things out, still carrying wounds. They built their entire perception around who you were at your lowest point, and everyone decided with absolute certainty that's all you'd ever be. They wrote the script. They cast you as the permanent victim. They sold tickets to your continued failure. But while everyone else was busy recycling assumptions, you were evolving at a pace their imagination couldn't track. You didn't announce it. You didn't ask permission. You just upgraded yourself internally, spiritually, mentally, and by the time people looked up from petty dramas, you were already unrecognizable. Not because you changed your essence, but because you outgrew the entire box. You broke out of what was supposed to seal you in, and now when people see you, cognitive dissonance hits them hard. The old tricks don't work. The old roles don't fit. The way people used to talk to you doesn't land anymore. You don't shrink. You don't over-explain. You don't seek validation. And that's what leaves mouths hanging open. They built their opinions like a house of cards, cheap gossip stacked on shallow assumptions, moments taken out of context, judgments based on outdated information. Everyone was convinced their version would stick, because the voices were louder, the crowds bigger, the narrative control better. But you didn't waste energy refuting anything point by point. You didn't defend yourself against twisted stories. You just lived your truth so completely that their lies started looking ridiculous on their own. You built from the inside out, not for revenge, not for validation, but for real alignment. And now the old script doesn't match your new reality. That's what exposes everything without you saying a word. People are still fighting a battle that's already over, still throwing rocks at a shadow. You didn't even need to clap back. You just evolved so thoroughly that exposure happened by default. Their bitterness sounds childish now. Their judgment feels irrelevant. And that silence when your name comes up, that's confirmation that those voices hold zero power anymore. But you did something during all of this that still hasn't been figured out, something that's about to shift the entire power dynamic permanently. While they recycled insults, you were rewiring your entire mental operating system. They kept running the same playbook, mocking, doubting, trying to box you in. Every insult on repeat, same energy, same tired strategies. They bet on you responding the same way you always had, breaking down, questioning yourself, proving your worth to people who already decided you had none. But while everyone else stayed stuck on repeat, You were doing something far more dangerous. You were restructuring your entire way of thinking. You questioned every belief you were taught to accept, every pattern you inherited from wounded people, every program running in your subconscious that told you to play small. You didn't just learn new information, you deleted old programming. Your thought patterns changed at the root level. Your emotional triggers dissolved. The buttons they used to push, you disconnected them. The guilt trips that used to work, they stopped landing. The shame they tried to pile on, it slid right off. And that's when the real confusion hit everyone around you. Now when they throw shade, you don't flinch. When they play games, you don't blink. Nobody can predict you. Nobody can provoke you. You're operating on a frequency others aren't tuned into. Everyone else stayed predictable. You became unreadable. What you tapped into isn't traditional intelligence. It's spiritual intelligence, the kind that comes from pain, transformed into wisdom, from watching betrayal and choosing not to become what hurt you. Your presence shifts energy now. You don't prove anything. Your growth speaks first, and people are left trying to decode how you became so unbothered, so sharp, so untouchable, but they'll never find the answer, because what you built can't be accessed by the same mindset that tried to destroy you. And here's where it gets even more lethal. You became the antidote to their manipulation, and that's what keeps them up at night. They figured out their playbook, how to shape how you saw yourself by controlling how others saw you, create confusion, plant doubt, isolate the target, watch the unraveling. It's the oldest manipulation playbook. They ran it perfectly, except you didn't just survive it. You studied it. You decoded the entire system. You turned their manipulation manual into your freedom guide. If this message speaks to your soul, hype this video so other chosen ones can discover it. Now you don't just see manipulation happening, you recognize its fingerprints before the lie forms. You sense the shift in tone before the deception lands. You catch gaslighting in real time. You've developed psychological awareness that makes you untouchable, not because you're cold, but because you healed the hook they used to reel you in. Your intelligence isn't built on credentials, it's built on experience, endurance, emotional survival. You didn't memorize facts, you learned human behavior. You became fluent in silence, body language, spiritual tension, emotional residue. That's a language manipulators can't speak. Some people only know power through control. You know power through clarity. You don't say a word. People just know you see everything. They used to bend truth around you. Now they fumble when you look them in the eye. Not because you're confrontational, but because your presence exposes what they hide. What terrifies them most isn't that you see them, it's that you don't need them anymore. You're immune to their tactics. Their approval means nothing. Their disapproval means less. You don't play along. You don't seek peace where there's no respect. Their plan was to train you to obey. You flipped the system. Now you train minds. You lead energy. You control the pace. You set the temperature. You became the antidote to the manipulation that once held you hostage. And now they can't function around you because lies can't live where truth lives. You didn't just become smart in one area. You became multidimensional in your awareness. While others focused on surface-level tactics, you were developing layers of understanding they couldn't penetrate. You learned to read what people meant versus what they said. You mastered the art of detecting incongruence between words and actions. When someone's mouth says yes but their energy screams no, you catch it instantly. When their compliments carry hidden barbs, you see through the smile. When their concern is really control dressed up nicely, you recognize the costume. This is the intelligence that comes from being underestimated for so long. You had time to observe without being observed. Time to study without being studied. They thought you weren't paying attention, so they got sloppy around you. They revealed their methods. They exposed their motivations. They displayed their mechanisms of control because they assumed you were too simple to decode what was happening. That assumption was their downfall. You were taking notes the entire time, mental screenshots of every contradiction, every inconsistency, every moment their mask slipped, and now you've become so skilled at reading people that you can predict their moves before they make them. You know who's going to shift before they decide to do it. You sense the change in loyalty before it manifests. You feel the shift in intentions before actions follow. You silence them with receipts, not revenge. Their lies were loud. Their fake stories were bold. Their narrative twisting was comfortable. The version they pushed seemed like it would stick because the platform was bigger, the voice louder, the connections better. What they didn't realize is that while their mouths were running, you were running the long game. You didn't chase rumors. You didn't correct every whisper. You stayed quiet on the surface, but you weren't blind beneath it. You were gathering receipts, not just screenshots, though you had those too, but emotional receipts, the kind that come from paying attention. You remembered inconsistencies in their actions, timelines that didn't line up, fake concern masking control attempts. You noticed who spoke up and who stayed silent. You paid attention to tone, shifts, patterns. You watched who celebrated your wins and who celebrated louder at your losses. And most importantly, you kept working. You stayed focused. You didn't let their projections become your identity. While they were obsessed with tearing down your name, you were building a real one. And when the moment came, because it always comes, you didn't explode. You didn't drag anyone. You didn't make it ugly. You calmly, clearly, unapologetically let truth speak for itself. You shocked them, not by stooping to their level, but by standing so tall in your evidence, your growth, your consistency, that no room for argument remained. You didn't throw mud. You showed proof. You didn't scream. You presented facts. Your life, your work, your transformation became the undeniable response they never saw coming. Now their lies float with nothing to stand on. Their contradictions are exposed. Their fake stories look ridiculous next to your reality. That's what silenced them. Not revenge, not rage, but the weight of your receipts laid down with such clarity it shut every mouth that doubted you. You didn't destroy them. You let truth do the job, and that's power they can't compete with. But here's what they didn't anticipate about your receipt-keeping strategy. You weren't collecting evidence to destroy people. You were collecting data to protect yourself. There's a massive difference between someone who hoards ammunition for attack and someone who documents reality for clarity. You were doing the latter. Every piece of information you retained wasn't about getting even. It was about getting free, free from their gaslighting, free from their ability to rewrite history, free from the confusion they tried to create. See, critics love to muddy the waters. They thrive in chaos where nobody remembers what actually happened. They count on people's short memories and selective attention. They bet on the fact that most people won't fact-check or verify. They rely on emotional reactions overwhelming rational thought, but you didn't give them that advantage. You stayed sharp, you stayed clear, you stayed grounded in what actually occurred versus what they claimed. And when they tried to flip the script, when they attempted to make themselves the victim of your growth, when they played innocent after playing dirty, you had something they didn't expect. You had clarity, not just your word against theirs, but a mental archive of exactly how things unfolded. You could trace the progression, you could map the deterioration, you could identify the exact moments when things shifted and why. The power to stand firm in your truth, even when surrounded by people trying to convince you it's a lie. The power to trust your own judgment, even when others question it. The power to know what you know, and not be swayed by popular opinion or peer pressure. They thought intelligence was about being the loudest in the room, but you showed them that intelligence is about being the most aware, the most observant, the most grounded in reality. They confused noise with knowledge. You understood that real wisdom often whispers while foolishness shouts. They wanted attention. You wanted accuracy. They craved validation. You valued truth. And in that difference lies the entire reason they're silent now, while you're standing tall. You're not competing anymore. You're operating in a realm they don't have clearance to enter. They thought this was a race, about being liked more, seen more, getting more applause. So they played the usual games, strategic alliances, passive-aggressive digs, performative kindness. Meanwhile, you were doing something completely different. You weren't chasing applause. You weren't building for validation. You were doing soul work. While they performed for crowds, you went into the depths, unlearning generational pain, breaking mental patterns, healing your nervous system, aligning with purpose. They wanted to be liked. You wanted to be real. And now that you've reached a certain frequency, they feel it without knowing how to name it. They can't figure out what's different about you, but something feels unreachable. You're in the same room but not the same level. Not because you're better, but because you're elsewhere. You're operating from clarity. You're operating from alignment. You're operating from a realm they can't access because they haven't done the inner work to meet you there. Your intelligence isn't loud or showy. It's internal alignment. It's knowing when not to speak, when not to engage, when to walk away, not to be mysterious, but because it costs your spirit too much to stay in places that don't match your energy. They can't decode that. They think silence means defeat. They think detachment means you have nothing to say. But the truth is, you've said everything needed by simply outgrowing the conversation. That's what makes you untouchable. You're not competing for relevance in the world they're trapped in. You've moved into a space that doesn't revolve around ego or status. You're governed by peace, by truth, by spiritual intelligence, and that makes you incomprehensible to those still operating on fear and control. They want to figure you out, but the passcode is healing. The key is self-awareness. The entry fee is ego death, and they're not ready to pay it. What's fascinating about this shift is how it changes the entire dynamic of power. See, they're still measuring success by external metrics. How many people agree with them, how much attention they're getting, how loud their voice carries. But you switch to internal metrics. How aligned you feel, how peaceful you are, how true you're being to yourself. They're playing an external game. You're playing an internal one. And there's no way for them to compete in a game they don't even understand exists. This is what happens when you evolve past the need for external validation. You stop caring who's watching. You stop performing for an audience. You stop modifying your behavior based on who's in the room. You just become consistent, authentic, real, and that consistency is what throws them off. They're used to people who change based on context, who wear different masks for different crowds, who say one thing privately and another publicly, but you're the same person everywhere. That's unnerving to people who live in duplicity. Your critics are shocked because they can't find the angle to attack. When someone's being fake, you can expose the fakeness. When someone's being inconsistent, you can point out the contradictions. But when someone's operating from genuine alignment, there's nothing to expose. There's no hidden agenda to reveal. There's no secret motive to uncover. You're exactly who you appear to be. And in a world full of pretenders, authenticity is the ultimate power move. They keep waiting for you to slip up, to show your cards, to reveal that you're playing the same game they are, just better. But you never do, because you're not playing their game at all. You left that arena entirely. You're building something they can't see, operating on a level they can't access, living by principles they don't understand. And the gap between where you are and where they are keeps widening every single day. Now let me put you onto something real. Destiny Engine. I built this because I was done watching chosen ones get dragged through betrayal, isolation and attacks while their enemies strutted around unchecked. I want to help you accelerate the speed of your divine justice and step fully into your purpose. And the beauty of it, you don't even have to lift a finger. Destiny Engine takes their downfall and flips it into your rise. This isn't another meditation app. It's declassified consciousness technology, the same mind programming tools your enemies once used to install fear, competition and scarcity, re-engineered to restore your sovereignty and align you with the cooperative, upgraded operating framework. It generates personalized sequences mapped to your divine purpose. The hardest thing you'll do is put on headphones, press play, and watch your enemies keep digging their own grave. The collective upgrade is underway. Start your Destiny Engine for $1 today and turn everything they did to break you into fuel for your rise. Link in the description. You studied patterns, not just people, and that's why they can't play you again. They thought you were slow to catch on. They thought your silence meant confusion. They thought your kindness meant weakness. But while they played the same tired games, you were studying patterns like a scientist. You weren't reacting, you were observing. Every conversation, every fake apology, every subtle manipulation. You were taking mental notes, not just on what they did, but how they moved, when they struck, what triggered them, what they used to trigger you. You weren't ignoring red flags. You were cataloging them like a strategist preparing for war. You weren't obsessed with them. You were obsessed with the blueprint, because once you understand patterns, you don't need to keep getting surprised. You don't need closure. You don't need revenge. You just know how the story goes, and you exit before the plot twist. That's why they can't play you anymore. You've seen the formula. You've mapped the emotional cycles. You've cracked the timing of their gaslighting, the script of their love bombing, the rhythm of their guilt trips. What once felt like betrayal now feels like confirmation. Your intelligence now isn't just intellectual, it's spiritual surveillance. You feel things before they're said. You read energy before the message delivers. You track shifts in tone, micro-reactions, inconsistencies, and you don't need confirmation from others because your intuition is cross-wired with pattern recognition. They can't manipulate you anymore because your boundaries are coded into your spirit. Your discernment isn't reactive, it's preventative. They thought you were naive, but you were watching, learning, and now that you've figured out the system, you made yourself unplayable. That's not just power, that's freedom. And to those who thrived on your confusion, that freedom is terrifying. Here's what makes your pattern recognition so lethal. You don't just see the pattern in one person, you see it across multiple people. You recognize the same manipulation tactic, whether it's coming from family, colleagues, or strangers. The packaging might be different, but the essence is the same. And once you crack the code, you can spot it anywhere. It's like learning to read. Once you know how, you can't unsee the letters forming words. Once you understand manipulation patterns, you can't unsee them when they're being deployed. You know what it feels like when someone's testing your boundaries. You recognize the sensation when someone's trying to make you doubt your perception. You can identify the exact moment when someone shifts from genuine to performative. And here's what shocks your critics most. You don't react emotionally anymore when you spot these patterns. You used to get upset, hurt, angry, confused, but now you just observe with detached clarity. Oh, there's the guilt trip, there's the victim reversal, there's the deflection, there's the projection. You see it, you name it mentally, and you don't engage with it. This level of emotional regulation combined with pattern recognition makes you virtually manipulation-proof. People are used to others who either don't see the pattern or see it and still fall for it anyway. But you're in a category they didn't know existed. You see the pattern, and you simply opt out. You don't try to fix them. You don't try to make them see what they're doing. You don't waste energy explaining or defending. You just remove yourself from the equation. And that response breaks their entire playbook. Because manipulators rely on your emotional engagement. They need you to react. to defend yourself, to prove your innocence, to seek their approval. But when you stop providing that emotional fuel, their tactics become powerless. It's like trying to start a fire with wet wood. Nothing catches, nothing burns. You've made yourself fireproof to their attempts to ignite your emotions. You outsmarted the narrative they built around you. They painted a picture carefully, one-sided, filled with assumptions and half-truths. They cast you as the villain, the failure, the problem. Their narrative was loud, convincing, designed to trap you in a story you never agreed to. But what they didn't realize is that stories can be rewritten, and you became the author of your own life. Instead of reacting to their plot, you stepped back and observed. You didn't waste energy defending a version of yourself that existed only in their minds. Instead, you focused on living your truth, quietly, deliberately, with purpose. Every move you made, every challenge you faced became a new chapter they didn't expect. They anticipated you'd stay stuck in the role they assigned. But you shattered that script. You didn't argue with the characters they created. You ignored the side plots meant to distract you. You worked on your own path, one filled with growth, resilience, unexpected twists. The parts they doubted, you made those your strengths. The setbacks they gloated over, you made those your strengths. The setbacks they gloated over, you turned those into stepping stones. Now when their narrative surfaces, it sounds hollow, outdated, ridiculous, because it doesn't match the reality you built. What was meant to be your cage became your launching pad. You didn't just survive the story, they forgot you had the pen the whole time. This is why their attempts to control the narrative fall flat. You aren't a character in someone else's story anymore. You're the author, the director, the editor, and the masterpiece you've been crafting reveals a truth so powerful, so undeniable that their script no longer holds weight. But let's talk about what it took to rewrite that narrative, because it wasn't just about ignoring what they said. It was about building something so undeniable that their fiction couldn't compete with your facts. See, critics love to deal in speculation and interpretation. They traffic in maybe and probably and allegedly, but you dealt in results. Concrete, measurable, undeniable results. While they were spinning tales about who you were busy becoming someone they never imagined. While they were predicting your failure, you were creating success they couldn't explain away. While they were writing your obituary, you were writing your comeback in real time. And here's the brilliant part. You didn't announce what you were doing. You didn't defend your process. You didn't justify your choices. You just kept building, kept growing, kept evolving, and you let the results speak for themselves. You understood something they didn't, that the best response to criticism isn't a defense, it's a demonstration. Don't tell them they're wrong. Show them. Don't argue about your potential. Actualize it. Don't debate about your capabilities. Display them. This is the difference between someone who understands optics and someone who understands substance. They focused on controlling the perception. You focused on creating the reality. And reality always wins in the end. Your critics are silent now because there's nothing left to say. They predicted you'd fail. You succeeded. They said you'd stay stuck. You evolved. They claimed you'd never amount to anything. You became everything they said you wouldn't. And when reality contradicts narrative that completely, the narrative dies. Not because you killed it with arguments, but because you made it irrelevant with achievements. This is power they can't comprehend. The power to make critics irrelevant, not by defeating them in debate, but by succeeding so thoroughly that their criticism becomes a historical footnote to your triumph. You used the same pressure they sent to destroy you, to refine your mental arsenal instead. Every judgment was a challenge. Every slight, every rumor, every attempt to undermine your confidence was actually fuel. Fuel you chose not to waste but to use to refine your inner strength. Instead of letting attacks weigh you down, You used them as raw material to sharpen your arsenal. Each jab, each sneer, each underestimation became a tool you wielded with precision. They wanted to weaken you. You flipped the script. Their pressure became a forge, intense heat that melted away doubts and distractions, leaving only a clearer, stronger version of yourself. You took what was meant to break you and transformed it into insight. Now your thoughts slice through confusion like a blade. Your mind isn't a battlefield anymore. It's a weapon. What's extraordinary is you didn't just survive this pressure, you grew because of it. Their negativity became the catalyst. While they tried to trip you up, you became smarter, sharper, more discerning. You learned to read between the lines, to spot hidden motives, to understand deeper currents beneath surface conflicts. The insults lost their sting because they weren't personal attacks anymore. They became lessons in disguise. Every time they doubted you, it forced you to prove yourself to yourself. Every time they whispered behind your back, it pushed you to elevate your vision and refuse to be limited by their small minds. You're not carrying scars, you're carrying trophies forged in adversity. What they intended as pressure to crack you only refined your mind and spirit. Now when confusion swirls, your insights cut through effortlessly. You didn't just survive their attempts to tear you down. You outsmarted them by using their own pressure to become unstoppable. You recognized that pressure reveals truth. It exposes who people really are when their facades drop. It shows you who's genuinely in your corner and who was just there for the show. Their attempts to break you became a filtration system, separating the real from the fake, the loyal from the opportunistic, the authentic from the performative. You also learned something critical during this process, that the people who apply the most pressure are often the ones carrying the most pain. Hurt people, broken people try to break others, insecure people attack security in others. Once you understood this, their attacks stopped feeling personal. You saw them for what they were: projections, deflections, desperate attempts to externalize internal chaos. This understanding elevated your intelligence from reactive to compassionate, not the kind of compassion that tolerates abuse, but the kind that sees clearly without hatred, that discerns without bitterness, that protects without becoming what tried to destroy you. You became someone who could recognize pain without absorbing it, acknowledge dysfunction without participating in it, witness toxicity without becoming toxic. And that level of emotional and spiritual maturity, that's what shocked them most. They expected you to fight fire with fire, to become bitter and vindictive, to seek revenge and burn bridges. But you did something they couldn't predict. You shocked them because they never imagined someone they mocked would become a mirror. They spent so long laughing at what they thought was weakness that they never imagined you'd become the reflection of everything they feared. When they look at you now, they don't just see you, they see themselves stripped bare of carefully constructed facades. Your presence shines light on their insecurities, their lies, their mistakes, things they tried desperately to bury. You became a mirror they can't ignore, no matter how hard they try. Every time they catch a glimpse, it's a reminder of their own failures and hypocrisies, a silent accusation that unsettles their peace. That's why they avoid you, why their voices falter when your name comes up. It's not because you said anything dramatic. It's because your very existence calls them out. You didn't raise your voice or point fingers. You simply became undeniable. Your growth, your calm, your refusal to be dragged into chaos. It all stands as proof that their attempts to diminish you failed, and that conviction stings worse than any insult. Unlike temporary validation or hollow revenge, your strength comes from a well nobody can drain. It's internal, steady, unshakable. You stopped chasing approval because you recognized it was a trap, a fleeting high that left you empty. Instead, you turned inward, connecting with a source of intelligence and resilience that doesn't depend on external voices. This power renews itself every day, like a deep river flowing beneath the surface, carrying you forward no matter what storms rage above. They try to shake you, to poke holes in your confidence, but their efforts bounce off because what you have isn't fragile or borrowed, it's self-sustaining, the kind of power that doesn't prove itself with noise, it simply is, and that's terrifying to those who tried to silence you. People who live off others' energy through control or manipulation can't fathom strength that doesn't require their input. They expect you to need them, to feed off their approval, or crumble under their judgment. But you flipped that script. Your power doesn't just survive in their absence. It thrives. That silent, unyielding strength humbles others without a word. It unsettles those who tried to rob your voice because it proves real power isn't loud or reactive. It's constant, calm, invincible. You didn't just take power back temporarily. You became the source of your own power permanently, and that energy can't be stolen, broken, or borrowed. It just keeps growing, and you became living proof that humiliation was just the first draft of a divine comeback. They thought breaking you down would be the end. They aimed to discredit you, reduce your worth, make you small and manageable, but what they didn't see was the bigger picture. Humiliation wasn't the final chapter. It was the first draft of your divine comeback. Every sneer, every belittling word, every moment you felt less than was actually a prelude to something greater, a detour testing your resolve. But instead of breaking you, it forged you. It shaped you into someone who could not only rise but soar beyond the limits they imagined. You became living proof that moments of shame aren't the end. They're the beginning of transformation. The quiet one they laughed at is now the one who holds the final word, who commands respect without demanding it, whose strength is undeniable because it grew from hardship and humiliation. They never imagined their attempts to humiliate you would fuel your rise. They failed to see you were rewriting your story in real time, turning their insults into lessons, their doubts into determination, their underestimations into undeniable victories. Now you don't just survive their scorn, you outshine it. You don't need their approval because your comeback is divine, authentic, unstoppable. Humiliation was never your endgame. It was the rough draft of the masterpiece you were destined to become. So understand this deeply, chosen one. You silenced the critics not by meeting them on their battleground, but by transcending the entire fight. You took back your power, not as a fleeting victory, but as permanent transformation, one that reshapes how you see yourself and how the world sees you, the sharpening of your mind, the deepening of your wisdom, the unwavering alignment with your truth. You rewired your consciousness. You outsmarted narratives designed to cage you. You became the mirror reflecting their insecurities back. This is the kind of strength that humbles others silently, leaving them unsettled because it cannot be touched, borrowed, or stolen. You aren't just operating on a different level. You are in a completely different realm, one they don't have clearance to enter. And remember, the humiliation they used against you was never your defeat. It was the rough draft of a divine comeback. The moments meant to diminish you became the crucible that forged an unbreakable spirit, a mind sharp with clarity, a presence commanding respect without uttering a word. And you showed the world that real intelligence, real strength, real victory come from mastering yourself first. This is your story, extraordinary, unshakable, divine, still unfolding. The smartest, most powerful version of you is just getting started. The critics are silent now, not because you shut them up, but because you made their voices irrelevant. You took your power back, not by demanding it, but by remembering it was always yours. And you shocked them with your intelligence, not by showing off, but by becoming who you were always meant to be, someone they could never predict, someone they could never control, someone they severely underestimated. And now, watching you rise, they're learning the hardest lesson, that the person they tried to destroy was always the one who would transcend them completely. Welcome to your divine comeback, chosen one. The game is over. You won, not because you fought louder, but because you evolved smarter. This is only the beginning.